Good morning, everybody. Uh, Welcome to We Have Something to Say with Leonard Watkins and Kenneth Lively. Kenneth has training today, so um, Kenneth has training today. So what we're gonna do is have two guests on here today, and we've got some stuff we want to talk about. So I'm waiting on Marion McMillan and Michael Stokes is gonna be on here, who I've always tried to want to get on here. To give some different viewpoints. I don't necessarily always like hearing my own viewpoints. You got to hear some other people's viewpoints about some of the stuff we're talking about. So if y'all can just bear with me right quick, I need to send Michael this invitation, and Marion will be on here in a minute. He just texted me something about him having a hard time getting the invitation. So just bear with me. But one of the things I want to talk about while I'm waiting is I was out with my younger brother. I'm laughing because Kenneth already says, "Why you say younger brother?" I was out with my brother yesterday having lunch, and we were talking about the National Guard being in Washington D.C. And first, a lot of times my knee-jerk reaction is, "Man, I can't believe they're doing this." Blah 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 blah, and my brother Brian says, "Well, Leonard, let me ask you a question. How do African Americans in D.C. feel about the National Guard being in D.C.?" And he said, "From what I'm hearing, some of them aren't displeased about the National Guard being in D.C." I was like, "Really?" It made me stop and think. Like, really? And because their perception of crime in D.C. may be different than yours. So, of course, that made me stop and think about, okay, it's easy to talk shit when you're not in the mess. You're not dealing with the quote unquote crime or your perception of the crime. It's easy to say, that's fucked up what Trump is doing, blah 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 blah. It's another thing to say, well, what are the people who have to deal with the consequences of being in D.C.? Which led to another question for me. It led to a bigger question for me, which is, how do African Americans feel about crime? We hear a lot about black on black crime, blah 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 blah. People hate that. People hate that statement. Some of the response you get back is there's no such thing, but it's got to be something to it in order for it to keep coming up. And even when I talk to friends of mine or colleagues of mine, they have interesting feelings about it. Like the narrative may have some truth to it, regardless of what we call it. Like, I think people respond by going, there's no such thing as white on white crime. And I always tell people, yeah, I don't like turning the boat towards that. I don't like turning the boat towards quote unquote white on white crime. That's not something I like doing. So Michael Stokes, thanks, sir. Thank you for coming on. We ate Marion McMillan, and Michael is the big golfer, and he had a rain delay. He so graciously agreed to come on the show. Then I want to give you a quick history about Michael, because you all don't know this about Michael. The reason I started doing this little podcast is because of Michael. About 3 years ago, Michael saw something I responded to on Facebook and typed to me, "Leonard, you need to do a podcast." That's what he said to me. And I was like, "What?" I literally was like, "What?" And then Kenneth hit me up maybe an hour later and say, "Hey, I saw this response that Michael Stokes says to you. I was thinking about doing one. Why don't we do one together?" So this whole idea and whole endeavor was started by Michael Stokes saying, "Hey, why don't we do a podcast?" Michael, hold on for 1 second. Yes, old man. This is Marion because he can't get on. Yes, old man. Yeah, this is. I'm backstage. You backstage. You're not backstage with me, so I'm gonna send you another invitation to make sure you got the right invitation. Look, I can't see you anyway. I got Michael Stokes on here. We 20 years younger than you. We got on here right quick. So this must be an old black man having problems with technology. Michael Stokes got on here in 5 minutes. So I'm going to send you the invitation again while I'm talking to Michael. So look for it again. All right. I'm about to send it right now. So anyway, so what I was trying to say is this whole endeavor really would not have started. Wasn't even thinking about anything like this to do a podcast. You know, I didn't think I really had anything to say. And because of Michael's suggestion, I gave it some thought and jumped on here with Kenneth. So, and Michael just got knocked off. So I'm hoping he'll come back on in a second. So the question becomes, again, how do we see crime? Like, and I don't know if I'm phrasing the question the right way. It's just, we got the National Guard. We know Donald Trump is a fascist, but he seems to be pressing certain right buttons to keep the attention off his own crimes. But do any of those narratives hit with a lot of African Americans? Like, for instance, Chicago. I remember we have a friend of mine named Stephanie Reese and her husband who live in Chicago. And I always say something that she said one day on the show. She says she had to deal with, either by sending her the kids, that she had to deal with, how does she put it, violence or racism. If she sent her kids off to school in Chicago to a predominantly white school, she had to deal with racism. If she kept them in her neighborhood school, she had to deal with violence. That's a hell of a statement to say, you know, and that's a hell of a choice to ask people to make. It's a hell of a choice to ask people to make. And so, like I said, is this a question that can be answered? I'm having a hard time putting into words. Do you have any feelings about it? Is there such a thing as a narrative about crime in the African American communities that, you know, a lot of people are tired of? Because again, you know, my brother is a deputy DA, and you know, when you're talking about crime, you know, his perspective on it is totally different. You know, whereas this, you know, down here in Atlanta, I'm Defani, whereas this, you have a lot of older Black women and elderly people going, hey man, we don't feel safe in our own neighborhoods. So then that's a question that needs to be addressed. Why don't they feel safe? And it's not enough police officers to do some of the stuff that y'all want people to do. It's not. So is it legitimate to say, that there's that Black people have a certain fear of crime in their neighborhood? Has the National Guard been in DC? Because I read that this morning that crime is down since the National Guard's gotten in DC. And I go, yeah, well, crime is down because a lot of people just aren't in the street because they're worried about being picked up. So, Mike, I don't know if you caught any of that, but the question for me is, my little brother said, how do African Americans feel about crime in DC? And are they really, really ticked off about having the National Guard in DC? Go ahead, Michael. Can you hear me, Mike? Mike, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Is that? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So yes, I just want to know what your thoughts on it were.
Son goes to Georgia. He's seeing firsthand. You know, he's telling everybody, the students up there, nervous, administration. And now, you know, I just read Trump is okay for, you know, for guys who carry weapons, DC area, which is ridiculous.
You're going in and out, Mike.
Can you hear me? I'm still on.
I can hear you now. Loud and clear. I can hear you now. You're still on. I can hear you. So he's going to try again. So we just have a connection issue, probably just where he is. You know, how do they feel about it? How do other people in other cities feel about it? How the African Americans feel about it? Is crime, has a narrative of crime or the feeling of being safe? I started talking about this last week. Unsafe, is it a false dichotomy? Do they feel safe? Some people have said, well, you feel safe just because you're scared of your own people. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. I think people feel safe because there's a narrative built around certain communities and their crime statistics in certain communities that create this feeling. I don't think people just jump up out of the blue and start feeling unsafe. I don't. I know my sister just came on. She and I were talking about this, and she was like, you know, I've gone to certain neighborhoods, even some rural areas that she felt unsafe that were predominantly white. And that she's gone into some public housing doing her job, then she felt perfectly safe. Now we also said, well, she went during the daytime too, and you know, so the quote unquote crime element may be sleep at that time, but the question still is begged to be made that do African Americans in DC feel safe? And are they quietly going, I'm glad he brought the National Guard in? And then is this going to go to other cities? And also something else my brother said was, well, you know, legally 30 days he can have them there. You know, same thing he did in LA. Do they feel safe in Chicago? You know, are those legitimate questions? Because a lot of times you get people who don't even want you asking those questions. They think it's anti-Black. You know, they think it's anti-Black for you to say this, that, you know, crime is not as bad in the African American neighborhoods. Well, you might say that. But the feeling can be fairly strong for a lot of those people. And the feeling can be fairly strong in places like Chicago. And you say, well, the crime rate is down. Well, what does that mean in terms of numbers? Kenneth just chimed in and said, instead of spending money on National Guard, give that money to improve these services in DC. He could. And I wish you were on here to debate that. He could, but he's not. You know, we know what this administration will and won't do. He's not. Good morning, Stacey. He's not going to spend that money. But does spending that, you know, again, I don't want to be all over the place on this. You know, right up the street, they're saying that the new Baltimore mayor, the young guy, has put all this money into these social programs, and he has down in the summertime in Baltimore, according to some of the social media posts I saw. I didn't delve deep into them. He had crime down by 92%. You know, so again, I don't know if that's true or not true. Said he had crime down by 92%. The guard isn't in the neighborhoods where crime is high. They're guarding the areas around the National Mall. I'm gonna take you on your word on that one because I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know. The question should be, and you as a former police officer, the question should be: is the mere presence of having all these National Guards there, people? Because some of the stuff I saw them doing, I thought it was totally illegal. Like just walking up the guys sitting on their stoop and searching them. I thought that was humiliating. Just walking in the neighborhood saying, "Hey, give me your ID," sitting on your stoop, and show of force with some of these guys. I thought that was straight harassment. But again, for Kenneth and myself, does it matter what I think if I don't live in DC? Is it you know, does it matter what I think about it? Because I don't know if it matters what I think about how crime is in DC if they don't feel that way. And it's funny because there's a guy in Augusta that I follow. His name is Brian Green, and I don't necessarily subscribe to the stuff that Brian says, but Brian's always talking about this in Augusta, like, you know, we can say this term and on the YNs. Brian's always talking about, man, they need to come down on some of these YNs for some of the shootings that have been happening in Augusta. So it's not just in DC. So I got Michael back. And so Michael, you could state what you were stating before, because I like to hear it, because I want to move on to something you and I talked about quite a bit about the DC and National Guard.
Yeah, like I said, my son attends Georgetown University, so So he's never really nervous, but he's really nervous now. Because it just feels like something off because students, citizens of the area are just really frustrated, So
You got some reverb in your voice, Mike, so it's breaking up. We're hearing like every three statements. We heard your son is.
I'm in Georgia playing the golf.
Oh, okay. So you might. So it might be it might be a connection issue. It might be a connection issue. They had 0 murders in Baltimore until a few weeks ago. So crime is down tremendously in Baltimore. Well, did they have 0 murders in Baltimore for the summer? That's mind-boggling. That's mind-boggling. Harriet says, I heard the Baltimore mayor talk about the decrease in crime. That is mind-boggling. They had the murders were down in Baltimore. They didn't have any murders during the summer. That's mind-boggling. And it's great. It's absolutely great. It absolutely goes to whatever he's doing is working. I remember when Kasim Reed was the mayor in Atlanta, one of the things that he did was when he came in, one of his campaign promises was to during the summer to open up every pool and park and to make it at reduced rates so that the kids had something to do. And the crime did drop significantly. So the crime dropped significantly. So obviously it works. I would again ask the question to Kenneth, and if he was here, he explained it. Do you think the narrative, is there some truth to the narrative that African Americans are worried and tired of quote unquote crime in their neighborhoods, and do they have different ideas of how it should be resolved to the best of their ability? Is it more policing? Is it more money and services? And then the last question to Kenneth, is this narrative playing in his favor? Because again, until Brian said that to me, I had never even thought about it. Like, well, how do they feel? Forget how I feel. And that's a big damn deal about how the citizens in that community feel. Because I know plenty of people in Chicago. I've talked to plenty of people in Chicago who are African American, who you in no way, shape, form, or fashion can say they're scared of Black people or they're anti-Black. No way, shape, form, or fashion could you say that. Who think that certain parts of Chicago where they live is not safe. They never know where it's coming from. Plenty of people who don't send their kids to the public schools in Chicago. That's the problem with closing recreational centers. But don't the GOP decrease access to social programs in poverty, high crime areas? Probably, but we're in a community, this is how I feel. I've said this for a while. We're in a community where all of the questions you ask about what people do to us, are they true, are probably yes. They're probably yes. And me and Brian talk about this all the time. Yes, they take away money from social programs. Yes, we don't get the funding that other places do. But at the end of the day, in the midst of that, we still have to figure out, in order to have a decent way of life, how to mitigate that stuff without their help. At the end of the day, is it possible for us to decrease or mitigate those feelings? Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that have to deal with it. At the end of the day, we don't really have any control over the federal government. And right now, Kenneth's going to be mad at me for saying this. Right now, we seem to have a national strategy of not getting involved because we're so pissed off about the election that we don't mitigate anything that's happening in our communities. I can't see it. I've said it before. I mean, if somebody has some other suggestions and they see something happening that I don't know about, I wish somebody would tell me. I can't see it. I just keep seeing rights being taken away. So again, how do we mitigate a problem? How do we mitigate a problem that we didn't create, even though it's affecting us disproportionately? And the student we should bring back, Pat. Oh boy, Tim, you about to get us in trouble. Just bring back paddling in schools. Is what you're saying, Tammy, that it begins at home, or that it begins at school, or teachers should have the authority to do corporal punishment in schools? Are you saying that's what will only get their attention? Because hell, it seems to be lately that if a teacher does anything to a student in school, the parents are up there on their ass. Growing up, our neighborhoods are more cohesive. You seem to know all the names in there. Absolutely, I agree with that. I think that's a big thing. Remember the GOP's hue and cry against midnight basketball. I wish you get your invitation right so you can come on the show. Everyone wants to feel safe in their community. If there were more services provided in our community, would cut down a lot of crime. I can't argue with any of that. So what I do say is I can't argue with any. I think all of those things are true. The corporal paddling, I think that's a desperate measure because we're basing what goes on about how we were raised, and we think that we were raised better than some of these kids. But I agree with all of that. But at the end of the day, if they don't provide, this is what I want to say, if they don't provide, and they're not, because they're cutting money, and as somebody told me yesterday, man, you wait till next year hits when it starts kicking in and you don't have money for aftercare programs. Are you just saying we're stuck? That's why I always try to get to. Are you just saying we're stuck? We're just stuck with what we got? You know, we just gonna sit here and take it? Or are we gonna develop our own, or not develop? Are we going to join those organizations and ask those organizations that are already in place, from churches to frats to sororities to social programs, to get together and say, hey, man, they are not, it comes back down to the same thing. They are not coming to save us. They just not. I was just literally looking on for my U page. I always get these posts. I was just looking on this guy just talking about the history of the treaties with the Native Americans and talking about the Louisiana Purchase. Now, I never thought. I just don't understand why Black folks can't solve the problem of crime in our own neighborhoods. Do we have the will? Because they are not. Their history states, based on they give lip service to it when they're in charge, but they're not doing it. But it's not the first time we've been in this position. So are we just stuck? I always get back to, do we have the will? Do we have the will as Black men? Because I expect Black women to have some choices, but I always gonna notice the physical strength to push this stuff through is going to be from Black men. So, and Ken, you and I always talk about it because you say, Lunch, what you want us to do? If I knew, I would be saying so. Are we just stuck? Are we just stuck? Are we stuck cutting off the Black man from the home through welfare and prison has killed the Black family? I agree to a certain degree. As a father and a grandfather, I agree to a certain degree. Where I disagree is, you have to have the want to stay in your children's lives in spite of all the odds. Your bond has to be strong enough to say, I cannot abandon this person that I helped make, in spite of it. And you have to say that the consequences of me chasing some type of crime, even though we're always disproportionately accused of stuff that we didn't do, you have to be able to make those critical decisions. Say, if I do this and I get caught, what's the ripple effect on the people around me, particularly my family, particularly my children? And it comes back to, how do we want our neighborhoods to be governed? You know, Brian says that a lot to me. Man, people are going to have to decide how they want their neighborhoods to be governed. And I get it. You know, this is what I tell people. Well, you know, it's hard as hell to do that when you go and you decide you want your neighborhood to be governed like this. And then you have that same group that says, we aren't going to give you social services. The minute you start governing your neighborhoods, they come and say, well, that's against the law. And they start arresting the people that's trying to make a difference. It's almost like we checkmated. 25% marriage rate in the Black community. Yeah, I mean, I know you about to bring up Scott Galloway. I already know you, man. You about to bring up Scott Galloway and what Scott Galloway said about the most detrimental effect. And why can't you hit that invite button to come on the show? I hate talking to myself. 25% marriage rate in the Black community. 25. God damn, that's low. But being married does not prevent you from being the father to the best of your ability. It doesn't prevent you. You know, you make choices about, even if you're in an out of wedlock situation, about where your time will be spent when it comes to regarding your children. Those are choices. Those are choices. Should I go play basketball, go to the club, or should I go pick my child up and we go and do something as a father and a child? If you aren't going to be with the mother, you know, if that's the case that you have, you make choices. There's still choices that you make to determine whether that child is going to mirror how you act, and that child will mirror how you act if you don't show up. There's consequence on each side. That child will mirror how you. Very few guys can get through it. Yet I've seen some on this social group that I'm a part of with the black guys, with black men getting on saying, "Man, I didn't want to be like my father. You know, my father never came to see me." And even when you're watching the words they put when they type, you can almost feel the pain. And they say, "I didn't want to be that." But I don't know if that's the way you want to get people to mirror you, by becoming something that you don't want to be. So, and again, it comes back down to the question, because I think we're veering off. You know, me and Kenneth always veer off on these conversations. It then comes down to the question is, do you feel safe in African-American neighborhoods, or is it some African-American neighborhoods you feel safe in? Because I always tell people, man, there's only 2 degrees. It's not 3 degrees of separation amongst African-American. It's only more like 2. And you never know when somebody's rolling up in your neighborhood. Because Ryan's neighborhood has had a house where somebody was using a studio and they had a shooting in the neighborhood, and no one ever would have thought they had a random shootout in the neighborhood. So is the narrative that, again, that wish I'll just say, well, no, I don't feel that way, but I know a lot of people do, or I don't feel that way and I don't know a lot of people who do, or you know, whatever it may be. And then what's the answer? I think it's great to, you know, I think it's great to always have conversations, but if we don't start trying to say, okay, what's the solution and where do we go? What's the point? There's really no point doing the show. I don't really get on the show just to always want to hear my own voice. I just want to know, okay, what can I do to be a part of the solution? With that being said, the president now is doing what I predicted he was going to do. Now he has made African-American women his target, and he always does stuff that gets a lot of attention to send messages to that core group that he's trying to send messages to. So right now he's trying to fire the only African-American female on the Federal Reserve. Patrick Moynihan report in 1965 raised a hue and cry when it had dropped down to 75%. Warren Buffett in the book The Millionaire Next Door said marriage was one of the pillars of asset building. So how do we change it? Okay, so now that we know, how do we change it? What do we do to change it as a community? What do we do? I mean, to sit here and complain about it all the time, that becomes a part of the problem too. So what do we do? Particularly people who are over 50 who've had the opportunities that were given to us because of 1964 Civil Rights Act. And if you're saying that, hey, a strong family base is the genesis of all our problems, what do we do to change it? Can we change it? Again, it comes back down to, are we just stuck? That's going to be depressing. If you're saying that, hey, man, there's nothing we can do, that's going to be depressing. So you're saying every other community will surpass us in this country, that we did the yeoman's amount of work to help it become the superpower that it became, that our ancestors did the yeoman's amount of work, and that our ancestors had less than what we did, less than what we had, less opportunities what we had, just not that long ago to my father's generation. Are you saying that we just don't have the will? I know what Marion said. Marion said, no, the pain hasn't got great enough, that it's not going to be will, it's not going to be love, it's going to be pain and fear. That only pain will change people's viewpoints. So are you saying that we have to literally go back to pre-1964 in order to change the community? I'm just curious. Is that what, Marion, is that what you're saying? So, because there's going to be a breaking point. And we seem to have so many breaking points right now that we don't even seem to know we aren't willing to hit back. I'm not going to say we don't know how. I will say we aren't willing to hit back. with this onslaught, because all the stuff that you're saying, it seems that they're trying to worsen those situations to permanently, as Claude Anderson said, permanently make us the underclass, only the consumer class, only the consumer class, all of that stuff. Trump doesn't get black support and he's racist, so he goes after black people in their communities. Well, Trump goes after, I would agree, Trump is transactional. And Trump goes after those. Of course, Trump was going to go after us. Surely we knew that if 92% of women voted against him and 78 to 80% of African American men voted against him, of course he was going to come after us. Of course. The question is, what were we going to do to mitigate that? Like, he literally went after only black districts in Houston to get those 5 seats. That's it. Roland Martin's been screaming this at the top of his lungs, literally. So then now what do black Texans do about that? What do they do? Like, of course. So what do they do? You know, Michael and I said point blank, the only thing that was going to wake Texas up was Greg Abbott up. And this is going to sound radical, and people will say, man, you're going to get in trouble for saying that. Man, we're already in trouble. We're already in trouble. For all y'all think that you're just going to wait this out and you middle class, your upper middle class black, this is going to come to your doorstep too, because you don't have enough monsters on your side to get your voice out. It has to be a collective, little stuff, little podcasts like this, whether everybody has one, it has to be a collective. Because the only thing that's going to change Texas state government, Greg Abbott, knows legislators, and I've said this time and time again, is for every black Division I athlete in the state of Texas to transfer and say, we won't play under that. We won't play that. We won't play that. We won't play that. And we do have to have the vote, but you're going to have to do something spectacular to get these people's attention. And then some of these young folks who parents think that they need to have vote at a higher percentage, which means we have to vote. I agree with that. Absolutely I agree with that. But you're gonna have to. Kenneth has always said, man, the work of protesting doesn't work. You're right. I'm not gonna say you're right about it doesn't work, but I think you should have a different strategy. For every state that decided to do that, man, we got to stop giving them bodies. Like, if Texas state government wants to do that, then we got to stop sending them athletes. University of Texas, Texas A&M, SMU, Texas Tech. You got to stop sending them athletes. You got to stop being, you got to say, no. Parents have to say it's not just about them and their kids. It's about the community. Because as I tell people all the time, when it comes to football players, and my computer's acting up again, y'all, so, you're going to have to make the decision that I can't send my kid to a state that there's a chance that no matter how good he is, or when I'm talking about social behavior, he's behaving or he's just acting like a regular teenager, but because he's such a great athlete, that he may get pulled over somewhere and nobody knows he is, and he's just treated like the rest of the community. I don't get how people don't understand that. And stop sending them bodies. Because that's the only message they seem to get. If they're going, my belief is this: if you want to send us back to pre-1964 with our civil rights, then we need to send you back to pre-1964 with all this money we're making for all these goddamn football and basketball athletic associations and track. If you want to send me, then we need to self-segregate. We need to stop sending them bodies at all costs. At all costs. Let them see what it's like to be 0-11 in the SEC. Stop sending Bruce Pearl bodies. Stop saying Bruce Pearl teaches my kid. Bruce Pearl teaches your kids. What can Bruce Pearl teach your kids if he's out there spouting some of the shit he's spouting in a state that's suppressing black voter rights. And they're doing it openly. At least Brian Kemp, say what you want to say about Brian Kemp. At least Brian Kemp's not, he as the governor is not out there spouting this. I'm not saying he's not trying to keep the state mostly red, but he's not out there spouting this. Now, Raffensperger and his deputy, they just purged 410,000 people off the vote rolls on Thursday, of which I was told 90% of them were African American. Those states that are doing that, you got to stop giving them bodies. That's not violent. That's not rioting. None of that. Public education in a lot of areas are already black. Okay, they are. They are. So what do we do to strengthen those schools? There seems to be a disconnect between younger and older Black Americans. Young people don't recognize the red flags of our rights being stripped away. Absolutely. The question should be, whose fault is that? Absolutely. And what can we do about it? Absolutely. I agree. There's a disconnect. Young people are stressed too, man. Young people don't have the jobs they have. All these people who, this can go off on another tangent, which I don't want to go off on. Young people who dedicate their lives to be coders or software engineers are being told their jobs won't be around in 2 years. You know, there's a whole nother statement about these tech bros being sociopaths to me. You know, as I'm on the platform probably of a tech bro, because our community doesn't have anything in place to mitigate this. And one of the things I want to talk about, Marion, if he come on the show, was, why are they not people who've had high levels of the government not in the community to tell us how to protect ourselves? Like Jay Johnson was the head of Homeland Security. Is he going around holding sessions to predominantly African American communities, say, look, this is how bad you need to protect yourself in this way? Is Marion, what was the former Lloyd Austin? Is he going around doing it? Or do they know something that we don't? I keep saying this, they know something we don't. Because it seems to me that if you have been at the highest levels of government, the inner workings of government, why wouldn't you come back to your community to say, y'all need to start preparing for this, and this is what you need to do? You know, and in your own way, this is what you need to do. This is one of the reasons why, can they, as African Americans, do it without being arrested? Because every move that Donald Trump makes and his minions make is always designed to send a message to specific people. The John Bolton thing is designed to send a message to specific people. If we can get him, we can get you. But they always could get us. So you can't be scared, because bottom line is, if you put your head in the sand, they're coming for you anyway. So with this administration, what do we do? I mean, we can sit here and scream at the top of our lungs about what they're doing. Okay, fine. We know they're doing it. We know they have the audacity to do shit that no one else has done. They've gone way beyond the norms of what anybody else has done. They've raped the government. They've enriched themselves openly and willingly. They got judges trembling. They got judges that won't make certain calls that we thought were the norm because they're worried about going to jail, because they've shown that they'll go after judges. And now, which I believe from day one when he won, I kept saying, man, it's just a matter of time before he starts going to the cities that were perceived as Black-led cities. And what better way than to go up to DC? I always thought Mario Bowser made a huge mistake by capitulating, because I'm thinking, I thought she was smart. As capitulation to them is seen as weakness. It's seen as weakness. So now he punches people who show him weakness. He punches them more. He doesn't stop punching. He punches you more. So how do we as a community mitigate that? You know, one of the things that young people worry about surviving this economy and technology. Exactly. That's what I mean. They're stressed out. Very stressed. Very stressed. And then you have the Black male Texas legislature show that fear can be a strong motivator to cave. Which ones are you talking about particularly, Marion? Because I don't know which Black male Texas legislature showed that fear can be a strong motivator. What exactly happened that motivated them to cave? I'm a little lost on that one. I didn't see that one. So I'm a little lost on that one. And I know you probably have way more information on that. Do those state legislatures not read history? they not do they not even understand the significance of Diane Nash telling a Mississippi judge, send me to jail? And she was pregnant when she was the head of SNCC, send me to jail. Because my son and my daughter be raised in a prison anyway. I might as well get used to it. And that judge is like, man, I can't do that. And if they aren't scared to lead, if they're scared to lead, why do we keep voting them in? Because literally they're trying to suppress any dissent, no matter how innocuous. No matter how innocuous it could be, they're trying to suppress any dissent. So what do we do to mitigate that? What do we do to help I'm a firm believer that what Gavin Newsom is doing is working. I'm a firm believer. And I felt that the first time he did it. And I felt, what can any group do against the government who has the power to do what it wants? We'll watch people yearly. Let me tell you what they can do, which I think is a huge mistake that they haven't done. Every Democrat can call for a general strike. They can shut shit down. And they can tell people that you might get hurt in doing that. They can literally stop commerce. Literally what happened last Wednesday in Israel is what made Netanyahu say, let's talk about ceasefire, because more than 100,000 Israelis hit the streets. And I mean, they hit it in mass and everywhere. Literally, Democrats can call for a general strike, and they haven't done that yet. Literally, they can place their bodies in front. But I don't think they've done that because they don't think that the people of the Democratic Party will back them when the government starts coming from. Me and Kenneth had this conversation 2 weeks ago when I said that if the DOJ goes after the Obamas should not be paying their legal fees. And he thought differently. They got millions of dollars. That's not the point. The point is the message has to be that you can go after our leaders and we're going to back them at all costs. No, they got $10 million legal fees. We're sending the money to cover their legal fees. They're going to have an unlimited supply to fight the government back. That's what people can do. Would you recommend any of your relatives work for the U.S. government to come on and criticize Donald Trump? I think, would I recommend it? Yes. Everybody's going to have to go through. It's not just about you. Everybody's going to have to go through some pain. If you're going to just keep your head down, but that's the quandary we're in, right? It's how can you tell somebody not to worry about their mortgage when yours is getting paid? Well, everybody's going to have to make a principled stand at some point because they're coming from all angles. Every angle they're coming from. Gavin Newsom, the only person yelling at us to do something while he is doing something. What the governor from Blue State, Pritzker in Illinois is doing something. I don't know if Hochul, I don't know if you think Hochul, what's her name? Kathy Hochul is doing enough. Who else? I don't know if I think the Gresham Whitmer thing where she said, well, I'm gonna have to save my unions like Lisa Murkowski. I think that's gonna backfire on her. Yeah, I think she should have stood tall because hey, you know what? It ain't our fault that a lot of your union members voted for a man that's anti-union. You're gonna have to stand up to him. Capitulating doesn't work. It just does not work with these people. It doesn't work. They don't want you to capitulate. They want you to be humiliated. They want you to capitulate by kissing his feet. And the more people you see stand up to him, the more people you'll get to stand up to him. So that's why so many people are flocking towards Gavin Newsom right now, is because whoever he has on that team says, you know, we're going to troll him exactly the way they trolled us. He trolls everybody else. And it's been killing him. But Gavin Newsom has been through the worst of it, right? He didn't send any money for the fires. Didn't send any money there. He sent in troops to send a statement against the Los Angeles. So Gavin Newsom got to the point where, shit, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. But this is not working. And the question becomes, how do you motivate your base? How do you motivate your base? Your base, Marion, you know I've said this. Your base is tired of getting punched in the face and it doesn't seem like somebody's punching back. So now the question becomes, how do we support those people who've been punching back? So now you got Jasmine Crockett down there who they're trying to totally make sure she loses. How do you support Jasmine Crockett? because she's been speaking abortion. Because I'm not right now at this stage of the game. You know, he would get mad. You know, my podcast is not big enough for him to know. I'm not supporting anything Cory Booker and Hakeem Jeffries do. I'm just not. I'm not. I don't see them as being effective. You know, because if you always want to mention Martin Luther King, then do some shit that Martin Luther King would do. Get your ass out in front. Take the threats that he would take. What is the Democrats' base? Hell, you want me to answer that? The only problem with Democrats' base is it's not homogeneous. Democrats is a big tent trying to get a lot of people to move in the same direction and to get behind something. But I can guarantee you this: everybody in that base, from liberal to moderate Democrats to conservative Democrats to most LGBTQ people to most Hispanic people, because most Hispanic people did not vote Republican, to a large part of Jewish people, to, I mean, how many people you want me to give you? Don't agree with anything this administration is doing. But I do believe that they haven't had any galvanizing force for them to get behind because they're like, you're being wimpy. You're just really being wimpy. So when you see something like Governor Pritzker, who's probably has aspiration to be president, we know Gavin Newsom does, get up and say, I'm gonna punch back. But again, Gavin Newsom's experience is, man, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Yeah, I might as well hit back on him because I'm not kissing his boots. Under no circumstances am I kissing his boots. And you already know that what Gavin Newsom is doing is effective, because James Munger, who is a big Trump supporter, just gave $10 million as of yesterday to fight the gerrymandering effort in California, to rebut the gerrymandering effort that was successful in Texas. So the question is, where are the people? The question is, where is the people? Because Gavin Newsom has done his job. I say this all the time as a little MPU chairman. The person you elected can go out and make all the public announcement he wants, but the pushes comes from the people that elected him. I would definitely criticize Charles Spetsnaz. I think Roland Martin is doing right. I agree, Harriet. Roland Martin is doing right. The push comes from the people. The Flower Angel Booker and Jeffries does not work. Yeah, I agree. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how Hakeem Jeffries can get on Politics or Not and say, I'm taking money for AIPAC. I just don't know how he does it. But I also know that there's enough people in the state of New York or in his district that can donate $5 to his campaign so that he doesn't have to do it. Whether he still should do it or not, I don't think he should. But if the people don't get behind what you're saying, you're nothing without the people. You're just nothing. You're nothing. If your leader makes a statement that's out there and you take a step back from your leader, you've left him out there on his own. And we're good at doing that. We tend to do that quite a bit. You know, Martin and Malcolm, it might have been the last two books that are trying to walk the line to stand and say, I agree. I don't think that's going to work right now, because they aren't playing a game against an opponent that believes in playing safe. That opponent believes, I'm coming for every kit and barrel that y'all got. You could play it safe, but I'm not. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So the question becomes, how do you get your friends? And here's another question. Is it just me? Because it drives me nuts to watch this stuff go. It makes me feel like I'm the crazy one to watch this stuff happening, but to get on my social media feeds and to see less than 1% of the people talking about this who are African American. That's mind-boggling to me, particularly if you're over the age of 55, because you had your shot. You had your shot. People fought for your shot from 1965 on forward. And you aren't willing to go back and fight for your grandkids' shots, your children's shots who might be 30. You know that 40 is the time that you start hitting your stride. You're not willing to get out and fight for them. Well, they should fight for themselves. No, they should. But you laid this foundation. You forgot to teach how important this was. You laid this foundation. We're responsible for a lot of this. You laid this foundation. You laid this foundation if you didn't do it like my parents did, which is, I remember going to the voting booth one time with my mom. You laid the foundation if you haven't done what Kenneth said when he said, I took my kids to the voting booth with me to let them know how important it was. You laid this foundation if you thought that chasing money was a be all end all. And now you find out, no, it's not about chasing money. It's where you spend your money. It's who you're supporting to get in office. Because the policies that allowed you to make money. It's the policies that allowed you to make money. Yeah. So we can sit here and keep blaming this on young folks if we want. But the question becomes, did we teach them how to fight it? Were we too busy trying to chase individualism that we forgot about the group? Because, Marion, you can attest to this. It was the group that moved the needle, not individuals. It was the group that moved the needle. And again, I go on too many of my social posts, and I'm just amazed at people who checked out. I'm always going, okay, well, what do you think is going to happen since you checked out? You think they're going to stop? Or you think you're just going to ride this out? You think you're going to just ride this out? Because again, these tech bros are showing you that they are not afraid of you not riding it out. They're saying they're going to eliminate 80% of the jobs. Well, how people going to eat? So these people are sociopathic. That's because I don't know how you could do that. But then again, I never knew how Elon Musk could literally stop USA aid, and knowing that people were giving a number saying, look, man, if you do this, 400,000 children will die. And not only did he stop it, well, that's not a good use of USA's money to save lives. Not only did he stop it, he burned the food that was left over that could have been distributed. So I don't know. Gavin Newsom's bus was not big enough based on the groups. He would need to roll over to move into the arena of Clinton and Obama. I don't necessarily agree with that now. I think when you're only left with one option, people tend to get behind it. I think there's more folks out there pushing him on to be the person that he is than you acknowledging. I think that people are just that fed up, whereas they're tired of getting punched in the mouth. I believe that. And I believe that the only thing that we can do to mitigate that, the only effective thing we can do is mitigate that. I saw somebody say yesterday, the CEO of Target stepped down. Then I saw this, I guess somebody said, actually a smart kid, and this gamer, but he's supposedly a genius, saying, yeah, he stepped down as CEO, but he's still the goddamn CEO of the board, which is a more senior position. So he didn't step down. He just got y'all thinking he stepped down. Because if you can't have the will to bring a corporation to his knees, or to bring a college to his knees. I mean, Trump, the administration right now is willing to bring colleges to his knees. The question is, why aren't you willing to bring them to their knees if they're going to do something that totally opposed to what's good for you? And all you can do with that is to take away bodies. What's important to a lot of these schools in the South is their athletics. And their athletics are dominated by African Americans, the ones that bring in the money. The revenue generating athletics that bring in the money are dominated by African Americans. All the powerhouse schools you're talking about are powerhouses only because of African Americans. And I don't. How could you let your kid go play for Bruce Pearl with his politics? Like, just. And somebody help me understand that. How could you let them go play for Bruce Pearl with his politics? If you don't have a coach that's going to stand up for your kids when they're outside of their uniforms, when they're at their most vulnerable, how in a state that's shown them that they're most vulnerable, hey, just play basketball, play football. How do we justify sending our kids there? I'm going to send all my kids to Dion. He's going to get first dibs. James Franklin might get second dibs because Pennsylvania's a purple state. Mike Luckabee is going to get dibs. Now, UCLA, USC, because Gavin Newsom is not out there trying to suppress African Americans' rights to vote. Illinois is not suppress African American rights to vote. Michigan's not. So if that would be my line in the sand. Then you go, well, all black people got to do is just do this. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is there's been no significant amount of voter fraud for them to justify what they're doing by kicking African Americans off the rolls. They shouldn't have to. And the only way you're going to make them stop is by sending a message the same way they send you a message. We won't send you any more bodies. If Bill Lee wants to keep doing what he's done in Tennessee, University of Tennessee won't get any more bodies. They can't even touch being competitive in SEC without black bodies. It's not enough schools in California. Bullshit. If the top 300 players in high school, of which they're dominated by 90% African Americans, then damn it, 90% of them should be saying, man, we're not going to any state that's decided that they're going to come up with excuses to oppress our votes and our rights. That's a scary thing to say, because you're thinking, man, nobody wants to, they really go out and they kill people with ideas. Well, what do y'all ever have? Do y'all have something else that you give? I don't. No, not about to be purged. They were purged on Thursday. I heard that on the news coming over there. If they haven't done what quote unquote the state said they were going to do by Thursday at 12 midnight, they were purged. They were done with the push of a button. And 90% of them were African American. So why would we keep? But the crazy thing about the Georgia State legislators is that they just strengthen minority participation in government contracts. That's the crazy thing to me. They just strengthen minority participation in government contracts, and they open up a whole new customer service thing to guide you through it. But Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, like Roland said, they are coming after black voting power, period. Here's the thing, what I keep telling people. And this is why I wanted Michael on today, because Michael was a former Division I athlete. The NIL money follows the athlete, not vice versa. If the athletes go to USC, the NIL money is going to USC. If the athletes go to University of Colorado, the NIL money follows where you're winning. You just have to say, it's the money is not great enough for me to suppress my own community. That's why I keep saying, do we have the will? Do we have the will to ostracize people in our neighborhood that's willing to go against the group? You want to go after we said don't go? We're just not going to fuck with you. There's a reason why we coaches said we got to get some of them athletes. That's exactly. If they want to send us back 1964 civil rights, man, that's the least you could do is send them back 1964 pre-sports. That's exactly what Bear Bryant did. That's a great documentary if you've never seen it. Bear Bryant could not convince the Alabama state legislator to change the rules to let him recruit black players. Couldn't convince him. So what he did was he invited USC to come down to Tuscaloosa to play the University of Alabama. USC had probably, Marion, I don't know what, 75 to 80% black players, and they whooped their butts. And they immediately said, we got to get some of them after they got their butts beat, and Alabama started accepting students. Immediately, because he knew they couldn't win if other schools were doing it. If other schools had started doing it and they weren't doing it, they were lost. There was no way for them to win. So, do we have the will? It's not do we have the power, it's do we have the will to use the power that we have? And the power has always been, since slavery, the bodies. I'm going to leave it at this. For those of y'all who don't know, if y'all want to see how it works on a high school level, go and pull up the new stadium at Grayson High School. Pull it up. You got to see it to believe it. Pull up the new stadium they created in Carrollton High School. Pull up those facilities. All built on black bodies. We're talking about kids 13 to 17. Pull it up. Do you have the will to not go and contribute? Do you have the will to say, I'm not going to play with some nice stuff? Those same stadiums should be out of Southwest DeKalb. That Southwest DeKalb, Cedar Grove, Stevenson, MLK, all those powerhouse high schools that they diluted. Go look up Grayson new stadium, Grayson's football facilities, high schools. Go look up Carrollton High School's facilities. They could not have done any of that stuff without black bodies. Yep, Sam Bam Cunningham from Augusta, Georgia. Wasn't he from Augusta? I know Chip Banks was. Go look him up. We just got to stop. We got to stop paying for our own oppression. We got to send a message that, hey, look, we might not have control over here in the state legislatures, but we got control of where we can go. We the sheep, but we got the control of who's going to eat us. We got leverage to say, I might be a bunch of sheep, but I got to leverage on, it's a whole bunch of wolves out there that need to feed off my flock. UCLA needs it, USC needs it, San Diego State needs it, New Mexico State needs it, Illinois needs it, Michigan needs it, Maryland needs it. Let them feed and let them grow powerful as long as they're looking after our agenda. But anyway, y'all, it's 11:01. I got to go because I got to be someplace. So Kenneth be back next week. Marion, I hope we'll get your invitation on Mike right next week. Mike, please, please, please come on the show next week. Anybody else that wants, I can hold up to 10 people on the show at one time. So please come on. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everybody that joined me today. And I've seen the Grayson State, and it's unbelievable as well as a high school. Black bodies. Black bodies, high school. What's next? Elementary school? So anyway, I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for joining us, and y'all have a great weekend.